So hello everybody, today is Monday the 31st of July 2023. This is the second of two that we're discussing with Anthony Stansfeld. He was the ex-crime commissioner of Thames Valley Police, and he was also the lead on fraud at the Association of Police Crime Commissioners. He has done one statement that relating to what we're discussing in January 2018, and he's done another statement called High Level Fraud 2013 to 2021. This is the subject matter that we're discussing. And last one, we covered what the problem was, and today we're going to discuss, hopefully, how we can end banking frauds using all the evidence that we have. So I wanted to ask the questions. Anthony, I've kind of made notes of what we've said before. Is that I'm looking at what's not apparent and what's invisible, and that is that £200 billion laundered every year since, say, 2008 up till now is a lot of money that can't be hidden. So it must be recoverable, surely, most of it. That's the first question.
I mean, the answer is nobody knows what the figure is at all, because nobody has really looked at it. It was looked at by, I think, a university. I think it was Southampton University. I looked into it, Portsmouth, and they put it at 100 billion a year. And I think they were only covering a bit of it. So, I mean, nobody really knows what the figure is. I mean, what the hell they do with it, I don't know, but it's quite clear that for you and I to suddenly get large sums of money into our bank account, people want to know where it is. But if banks move around hundreds of millions of pounds between sort code numbers, it can be abroad before in the twinkling of an eye. So it sits abroad. But I mean, the sums of money are so huge, I don't really know what they propose doing it. I mean, it's sums of money that are so vast. But a lot of bankers seem to retire extremely rich people, and money is unlimited for them, which I find odd.
Yeah, so like I would propose that that the money they've rather than having spent the money, they've just kind of denied it to us, and then made the pretense of the government needing to rescue the banks. I think it's all a pretense, because as you say, that vast amount of money is not anything that's spendable. And then the countries or the places where the money has gone to, and obviously this is now bringing us into international law because it's outside of the UK. And so then we do have this law called the Crime International Cooperation Act 2003, which is a UK law, and it was brought in to stop terrorism, anti-terrorism law. So I'm classing this kind of massive fraud as a form of terrorism against the people of England. And then I'm going to kind of sum up that not only was it that the money should have been recovered by now, the victims should have been compensated by now. So I'm going on the timeline. So your first statement went up to January 2018. The second statement, high level fraud, goes up to 2021. Now we're in 23, and those crimes are, as we discussed last time, are carrying on as banking frauds and repossessions and business shutdowns, and all that is still going on. So what we're discussing is that surely international laws, anti-terrorism laws, are invoked. Over to you, Anthony.
Well, I said I don't know what's happened to the money. What's quite clear, they haven't paid the British taxpayer back, because we still own large proportions of the NatWest, and I think we also own some of Lloyd's. So they haven't paid the money back. What we don't know, of course, is what enormous holes lie in the accounts of the banks and in the pension funds and things like this. Maybe the money is going desperately trying to shore up the dike before things go seriously wrong. I mean, I'm not a financier. I don't know. What I do know is that very large sums of money seem to disappear over the horizon, and a huge number of British companies, of small and medium and some quite large companies, have been financially destroyed very often on completely forged documentation, and totally unjustifiably. And individuals have been pursued for debts which there simply don't exist, and they seem to tie up our civil courts. A lot of our civil courts. I went to a court case recently where there was no apparent debt at all. Nobody put themselves forward as a debtor. Nobody knows how much money was owed, none apparently. Well, why on earth have they been made insolvent? I mean, and this seems to happen endlessly, that people clearly aren't insolvent, but the insolvency practitioners, some of whom appear to be downright corrupt, will manufacture insolvencies to steal people's money. And I find the whole system needs a root and branch look into. I may be wrong, but I don't believe for a moment that I am wrong. I think I'm absolutely right on this.
I think you're describing double standards, Anthony, that one thing for them and one thing for us, and they always win and we always lose, it seems.
Yes, I mean, if you have unlimited money for some of the most experienced legal companies in the country, I mean, it's interesting to look at what the bank's bill is for lawyers annually. I shouldn't think the Lloyd's bill is much less than £1 billion a year. It's certainly into the hundreds of millions, many hundreds of millions of pounds, and most of it goes to one or two big city practices. So, of course, they're in each other's pockets with the sums of money are so big. I mean, Herbert Smith Freehill seems to be the company that Lloyd's use mainly. And as a private individual, you can't come up against them. Even if you win a case in the court of law, which is pretty unlikely, they will immediately appeal it and appeal it and appeal it. And so you go up until you have no money. And of course, the money isn't the bank's money, it's their shareholders' money. And they're quite happy to spend it protecting basically their board of directors and misdemeanors within the bank, if not downright fraud.
Yeah, and on that point, I want to bring in that you said the last time that the judge had said that he was surprised at why the CPS hadn't taken on that particular case with the 12 million.
Yes.
So would that apply to the same as, because the HBOS Reading case, the 7 million, that the budget should really be transferred back to CPS, surely?
Well, I mean, it costs the police 7 million. I don't think it costs the CPS 7 million. But the money that comes out of cases, should firstly, primarily, in the very few cases where cases are actually won, and it's only in the criminal courts they seem to be won, the money should go back to the victims. Now, against the bank, you can probably get the bank to pay the victims, and a fine should probably go to the police and the CPS who prosecuted the case. But that doesn't really seem to happen very often. And that £12 million case was a private case, privately brought. So the police and CPS weren't really involved.
Well, I'm just saying that you could send the CPS the bill for the 7 million. I mean,
but the CPS hadn't got the money either.
Well, the HMRC should have topped it up, shouldn't they?
Well, it should have been topped up by the fine. The fact that it went straight to the Treasury was utterly disgraceful. Yeah, of course, the Treasury doesn't want you to investigate major bank fraud.
Yeah.
They've allowed it to happen and have covered it up for far too long.
And the other most shocking thing about all of this was the non-disclosure and the gag on those people who had to accept their, pittance. Yes,
I mean, it's absolutely disgraceful if to get your compensation for money the bank has stolen off you, you have to sign a non-disclosure agreement. That is quite wrong. And the misuse of non-disclosure agreements is rife in this country.
Yeah, because the public interest overrides it. So I think this is where we bring Lee into it, because Lee's been you're an auditor, Lee, and an accountant. So, about the parallels Anthony's drawn is when it's individuals, they can come in and take everything. When it's an individual against the banking frauds, we can do nothing. So we were discussing about what laws, now we're into the international criminal law arena. So Lee, have you got to propose for, accountancy wise, HMRC wise? Does this deem HMRC a criminal organization for criminally covering up? And then, is there a conspiracy to launder money, fraudulently trade? And then weren't these people having properties abroad, these ones that were prosecuted? So, Anthony, can you just confirm that these men did have assets abroad with that laundered money that were not recoverable?
Which money? Which case are you talking about, or talking generally?
Well, generally, and the ones that were jailed, particularly.
Well, I don't think we recovered very much money. I think the money was long gone at that stage. And I think it was a pity the police didn't follow it up more rigorously, because there was a lot more to follow up. We only prosecuted part of the case. But the money does disappear. I think they will come out of prison. Their money in this country will be largely taken. But of course, what they have abroad is well concealed. And, it goes through 2 or 3 bank accounts, said by the Virgin Islands, the Caymans, or Jersey, or probably between all of them. And it's usually impossible. And I mean, unless you have police officers wandering around the world on very expensive, costs the police force a fortune to chase up in all these places. It is very difficult to chase them up. And you say HMRC probably should be much more proactive, but I think it's difficult for HMRC. I think you have to, the banks should have the responsibility to sort this out, but quite clearly they don't. And we've just seen this with this disgraceful business of people, of PEPs, politically exposed people, which they can just take away their bank accounts left, right, and centre if they're being a nuisance in any way. I'm surprised I haven't had mine taken away yet, because I was a PEP. I may still be, I don't know, nobody will tell me. I can tell you there will be so many, what are they called, subject access requests going out from people today. I think the banks are absolutely overwhelmed. But I think Mr. Farage, whatever your views of him, I think he's done the country a great service by exposing at least a little bit of how the banks are able to cover up.
Yeah, over to you, Lee. From your perspective as an accountant and auditor?
Well, the United Nations has a global jurisdiction, and because the banks trade globally and have offices in many countries, then they would come under an international lawful system, which would mean that the International Criminal Court in The Hague would have appropriate jurisdiction and prosecution capability. And I agree that self-regulation is the simplest and cheapest method. However, can we trust the banks to be honest? Can they truly regulate themselves? The answer is no. No, we cannot leave the banks to honor their own disciplinary practices. I think we need an outside body that would investigate banks. And Anthony has discovered the weakness. He's discovered the weakness in the banking system, which is a complete absence of any ongoing investigation into banking frauds and theft of money and maladministration. So there is nobody. The Bank of England does not investigate. They're complicit. They're not interested. They won't look. The Treasury won't look. They don't investigate.
I mean, can I come in quickly? I mean, it is extraordinary I mean, I don't think we need any more organizations. The biggest problem we have is too many organizations, and they pass the buck between each other. But I mean, we have the Serious Fraud Office, the Financial Conduct Authority, the Solicitors Regulatory Authority, Her Majesty's Revenue and Customs, the National Crime Agency, the Bank of England, and there are about 10 more. There is no shortage. What you need to do is to have one of them running it properly. And we don't at the moment. And of course, there is a revolving door between the FCA and the SRA, the FCA between the banks, the SRA seems to be there to protect solicitors, not to hold them to account. HMRC is vast and cumbersome and probably simply doesn't have the people who understand this and are good enough to take on the very clever people in the banks. And the National Crime Agency, quite honestly, as regards fraud, has been a complete joke from the word go. We also have the City of London Police. Well, they seem to, the only reason for having the City of London Police was to take on fraud. Well, they haven't taken on a fraud for ages. So what the hell is the point of the City of London Police? We have the Met. The trouble is we don't seem to have a very good Met or a very honest Met at the moment. And therein lies another problem. So the last thing we need is another authority. We need one powerful authority that is properly run, honestly run, and has the money behind it. And it would pay for itself hand over fist very quickly.
That's right. And rewards would be given to those investigators who uncover theft of money and malpractice and fraud. And that would be an incentive to curtail, the industrial scale that's happening, and a lot of fraud the public never hear about. It's never leaked out from the system. It's kept.
No, it's complicated, so the press don't cover it.
Because I remember working 30 years ago within stockbrokers, and we found a lot of theft of money, but that was never revealed. It was always kept within the stockbroker. The police were not brought into it either. It was all dealt within the stockbroking firm, and
this is where the memorandum of understandings come in, isn't it? The silence, the secrecy, and the criminal cover-ups are all done through that civil route. But I was laughing, Anthony, because I think Nigel Farage just tried to call you, and it would have been great to have him on our show.
No, well, I have got to go very quickly, Neelu. So just be aware that I have got to get on because I have a string of things to do.
Sure, I'm sure you have, Anthony. Sorry. So brilliant. We've got lots of ideas there to take forward, and we'll let you go, Anthony. But we'll have you back if you have anything to announce. Just want to check the high-level fraud statement is for publication, Anthony. Is that okay?
Yes, very happy for that.
Great, thank you. Thank you very much.
I shall probably have my bank account taken away. We'll see.
No, you won't, because then we'll do another Zoom, and we'll get the Federal Reserve Board and, the whatever the American banking system is shut down over it.
Okay, right. Okay, I better get on.
Neelu and myself can carry on speaking.
Yeah, we will. We will.
Okay.
And no, thank you, Anthony. And we were leaving another question for Anthony to respond, which is that of enforcement, and also the fact that Swiss-Indo is a regulatory body, and
you see how
some of the gap.
How Anthony mentioned that he's possibly worried about having his bank account shut down, and he mentioned this PEP that
he is worried.
Yeah, there's I just want to address that, because there is this Public Interest Disclosure Act of 1998 which we mentioned. And Anthony is a whistleblower. He's an expert witness. in these crimes. So he's protected by the state. He has to be protected. If anybody harms Anthony, then they become a terrorist. This is the word where the word terrorist originates from, is that when you target good people in a country, you're a terrorist. So we will identify.
Which has happened to you.
Yeah, it's happened to me. And I know all the terrorists around Redbridge and in the NHS and the professional bodies there. So Anthony knows all these bodies. If they dare to attract themselves to our scrutiny, then we're already, as you say, Lee, we're already protected by the international laws of prosperity and peace. Which
we should be protected. We should be, but we still get.
We're protected by God, aren't we? We're protected by God and God's structures, which are invisible. They have to be because it's dangerous. But you and I have been still persistent in this. And I'm just praying that Anthony doesn't feel like anybody has any authority over him. And it's not fair that he believes that, you know, there's going to be good coming out from his interviews with Nigel Farage. I hope that's the case, but I just hope it, you know, they don't abuse it in the way that he says that maybe going on Nigel Farage's show might target him, you know, like we were targeted, Lee. We were targeted because we tried to do the right thing.
It's sad that that resulting from that interview with Farage, it seems that he hasn't done his research deeply enough, and he doesn't know all the facts of the case. So Mr. Farage should really familiarize himself more accurately with the true reality of those cases, and especially with the HBOS case, because it's quite easy to misrepresent and misquote.
Well, Nigel Farage said about the case, he said that was it about closing small accounts and stealing cash? Because
it was not.
Because we're talking about billions. You can't actually, it's not cash. You can't cash billions. And then it wasn't small accounts, it was millions. It was big accounts. And then he said to Anthony that you know, Anthony believes that this happened, but it's not a belief. It's already been in a criminal court, so it's a criminal prosecution, and they were jailed. So once that happens, it's not a belief. It's a fact that these crimes were committed. And
there were lots of frauds, like Lloyd's can actually force a customer to take insurance and pay £19 a month in insurance fees to its own insurance company. So there's a conflict of interest there. You know, Lloyd's is profiting by issuing a threat to a customer saying, look, we will only open a bank account to you provided you also accept taking insurance out on that account. If you don't take the insurance, then we won't open the bank account, you know, go away. So that's fraud number one, and it's a conflict of interest because Lloyd's owns.
Lee, I just want to come back to, I don't want to go into insurance and things, because we're still discussing the, you know, the international aspects of the money laundering, fraudulent trading by the UK banks. When I say that these people don't really go to jail, it's just because, you know, they get promoted when they come out and their assets are still preserved abroad. So it's not really a punishment, it's a promotion. You know, they go to jail as a promotion. So they get compensated for being in jail, whereas the people who are outside who've suffered, they have not yet been compensated.
And why should Mr. Stansfeld suffer threats? you know, they've caused an emotional alarm to him. He is now being distressed, and
Yeah.
he's being threatened, the possible threat of account closure by the banks. So that's very unfair. That could cause a psychological damage or trauma. You know, why should he live under a regime of being threatened, to having his account frozen and not having access to his money, the money that he has worked hard for, which happened to me? They froze it for several months. And then at the end of several months,
Yeah,
they
Lee,
then
look, can we just
"We're
come back to
closing
the
your account."
point, because you know we tend to elaborate. So just coming
Yeah.
back to the because I've only got a few minutes left, 7 minutes left. The words I want to use are precedent. We have a precedent of the criminal prosecution in 2017. And that means that all repossessions since that date, all insolvencies of businesses, banking frauds, fraudulent trading, is in contempt of that criminal prosecution in 2017. And then because in 2020, the Criminal Appeals Court was asked to reduce those jail sentences, the Criminal Appeals Court had a duty to ensure then that the crimes would not continue, and to ascertain that the jail sentences and fines were appropriate to be sufficient precedents, sufficient deterrence in the future. So as Anthony said, nothing has changed, nothing has got better. So that means that the bank should have been dissolved back then, because unless you dissolve it, it's not going to stop its crime. The whole purpose of having a democracy is that it has an effective criminal justice system. Everybody knows that if you commit a crime, you're going to be punished so hard as to stop you doing that crime. And if you're not punished so hard and you carry on that crime, there's a fundamental fatal flaw in the foundations of your democracy. It's not a democracy, it's a terrorist state. That's the conclusion I come to, and that the only thing you can do is to declare not only the banks as dissolved, unfit for purpose, but also the government as a terrorist organization. The UK government has terrorized whistleblowers like you and I, and are now terrorizing Anthony Stansfeld for being a banking whistleblower, police crime commissioner in leading in fraud with the Association of Police Crime Commissioners. And maybe we will do petitions if anything happens to Anthony's bank account as a result of his work, then there will definitely be grounds to shut the UK government down, surely, Lee.
It's a violation of the Rome Statute and agreements of 1945, whereby a state is unlawful, declared unlawful, and a state is a terrorist organization if it disrupts civilian life and engages in a kind of a war. It's a kind of silent war of threats and aggression, of we will do damage to you and we will get away with it. We will not be punished. And that's what the government says. We will not be held accountable. That is the problem of the UK government.
Where does the phrase? Where does
be held accountable?
Where is the phrase? An Englishman's home is his castle come from? Because every time somebody breaks a home in England, they're actually invading that home, and that you're meant to serve and protect your people. And if you, as a state, are breaking the doors, stealing their homes and cars and children and assets, then you are a terrorist. Surely the local government, central government, police are all conspirators. The banks are kind of secondary because banks just give the orders, but these people execute these orders to rob and steal and kill.
That's right. You've been subject to war terrorism, because they actually smashed your door to pieces, into splinters, which is an act of war. It's an invasion on your privacy, and it's an invasion into your private property that you own. You've got the title deed, you're the freeholder, and they've trespassed on your private property without permission, which is a declaration of war. And plus, you're a delegate of Swissindo, which means that your home is an embassy. You live in an embassy delegated by King Sino. So they've actually violated 2 international laws of it is war. No one can dispute that. To smash someone's door in and then make you pay for the damages as well. It costs it cost me £2,500 to have my door replaced, resulting from Hackney Council, who smashed my door. And it's been smashed several times, in fact, the police as well. So and we have mentioned the Rome statutes previously in other broadcasts, and people can do their own due diligence, their own research. They can discover, it's all on film. The evidence, the hard, undisputable evidence is all on film, all on camera. Neelu's got the invasion and war aggression. It's total aggression to smash someone's property and enter it without having permission of the owner. And it's totally undeniable. Totally. And the case
we have
would
to
be...
sign off now, Lee, because it's really run out of time. But I want to thank Anthony Stansfeld for coming, and Lee Kant.
Yes.
And these are 2 Zooms that we've tried to get to the bottom, to end banking frauds, to end state terrorism, money laundering, and human trafficking, which is murders of whistleblowers, is commonplace in England. So hopefully we'll launch Swissindo very soon. It has been 10 years now that we're trying to launch it, and it's got to happen, because this obviously can't continue, and people will be in prosperity and peace finally, hopefully 17th of August this year.
17th.